What's up, hobby friends? My name is Casey and welcome to another miniature rescue. Age of Sigmar 4.0 has just arrived, so let's save some Stormcast minis and talk about painting and collecting a little bit smarter. A new edition of Warhammer has come out, and there are a ton of great minis with it. With many people excited to try out the latest edition and get their hands on the models, there will be a window where things get a little weird on the used market. What happens when any new version comes out is that people want to get into it right away, when the excitement is at its peak. Getting an army painted the quickest, starting to learn new rules, and in a lot of cases getting ready for tournaments. What that translates into on the used market are many models and armies going up all at once in the hopes that it becomes cash for the new stuff. That means more opportunities to get those deals and expand your collection. I'm pretty excited about the new Age of Sigmar box. Both armies are ones that I have invested in, and I can't wait to add new units to both of them. That brings up the first point of this video. You don't actually need to buy the new box to get the new stuff. Let's take a look at eBay and you can see what I mean. Doing a basic search for Warhammer Skaventide, the name of the new box, and sorting it by buy it now, you can see that there are already boxes that have been split up. If you want those books, then those are all by themselves. Just the models, no problem. Even broken down into units and individual models. This is great because that means that you can mix and match newer units with ones you already have and still take part in the excitement around that new launch. The hope is, given enough time and printings, if you will, of this launch box, these models will drop in price over the next year or so. When Dominion came out, the AOS 3.0 launch box, it was about $200, and not even a year out, we saw prices hitting as low as $90 for a full box, which is pretty insane. Games Workshop made an absolute ton of those, way too many actually, so the pricing going that low is probably something that will be unique about Dominion, not so much everything else. But we can still expect some of that with every launch box. They want to make a lot of them, so there are a lot of models floating around. Even with prices being the highest they will be for a while, getting half of this box is still a pretty great deal. Both the Skaven and Stormcast collections in these boxes can be had for about $100 new on Sprue. So if that's what you're looking to get into, then those options are definitely here. As time goes on, we will see which units start to go down in price. Most of them are at a premium right now, but once the meta shakes out and units either see a ton of play or none at all, that will start to shift the prices. Probably not higher than they are, but definitely lower. That all being said, with the used market right now, there are plenty of deals to be had on all sorts of models. And today I do plan on adding to that market. I pulled out some Stormcasts that I purchased on eBay when Dominion was pretty new, and I've been wanting to work on these for some time. They're just really good models. The thing is, I have quite a few of these particular models, and they're already painted. I don't actually need them for my own army. So I thought it'd be nice to save these guys, paint up a few more from the Dominion box, and put them all back on eBay for someone else to use in a new army with the new edition, just to augment that new army and get going. Let's start by getting these guys into the Sonic Cleaner filled with LA's Totally Awesome to get rid of that old paint. The other models on the table are in pretty good shape, with only some airbrush layers on them. There are 3 Praetors, a Knight Arcanum, and Yndrastra. Pretty sure that's how you say that. Pretty sure. The plan will be to get all of these cleaned up and painted up to a slightly higher than tabletop standard using a couple of easy steps to improve the basic look. Before we get to those minis though, let me tell you about today's excellent sponsor. This video has been sponsored by Displate. About a year and a half ago, I moved into this space, and it's taken pretty much every spare moment since then to turn it into a real working hobby studio. Getting paint on the walls, cabinets for displaying minis, and even desks to work on have all been great, but it wasn't until I got some art up on the bare walls that I really felt like we were finally getting somewhere. Displate is about collecting your passions and getting inspired, something a few of us might know a little bit about. And I was absolutely ecstatic when I heard they were coming out with officially licensed Warhammer plates. I ordered a few, and as expected, they showed up really quickly. They ship in about 4 days. Unboxing a Displate is actually kind of awesome too. Each plate feels like a distinct piece of art and comes comes packaged so nothing will harm your investment. The unique magnet mounting system was also a fantastic surprise because it was super easy to get these on the wall where I think they're gonna end up. But I know if I ever want to move them around the room, I can take them down safely without damaging the walls. Having a collection of art makes this room finally feel like a real hobby space. And with Displate's massive variety of over 1.3 million designs from tons of amazing artists and brands, I'm definitely going to be expanding this collection and making this space feel even better. If your hobby room needs elevating with some fantastic and unique art, check out Displate by clicking the link in the description or in the pinned comment below. And use my unique discount code to get 22% off of 1 to 2 plates or 30% off of 3 or more. Thanks again Displate for sponsoring this video. Now let's get back to those sweet minis. After scrubbing off the models and getting them down to bare plastic, I can come in with an X-Acto knife to take care of the mold lines and get some of those push-fit parts glued down a little bit nicer. I'm pretty sure that most of the large kits and edition boxes are all push-fit now, and that's pretty great for getting started, but it's a good idea to try and get those glued together so they don't end up falling apart later on down the road, especially after they're painted. I've had that happen a few times. So I use a little bit of plastic glue to get everything together and start the pre-basing using PVA and beach sand. Pushing that PVA around with an old brush and dipping it into beach sand will create a great textured dirt base for the models. Once the primer goes down, this stuff won't go anywhere, and it makes it pretty easy to get a nice looking base without a ton of work. Easy to replicate over a lot of models too. You can dry brush it and pick up on all the little textures and leave it like that, or add tufts and grass and the ground underneath that shows through will still look pretty nice. After the PVA dries, it's time to prime and begin the base coating. I'm using black to start so we can get some extra control over the shadows and hide anything we can't reach with a brush. Like I said, these are going to be a notch above tabletop level, so if I can't reach something with a brush, it's not going to get painted. Still, 99% of the model will be covered, so you really won't even be able to see it. The black primer goes down, and now there are some options for where to start. Stormcast models are interesting in that they have two large features that you generally want to focus on, with either a dry brush or an airbrush. And this pretty much applies unless you're painting 100% with just a regular paintbrush. The idea is that you have a lot of models to get through, and you want them to look pretty nice. So there needs to be something about the models that stands out on the table, a focal point. If you prioritize the armor, then you can basically spray or dry brush all of the armor, whatever color you want, and come back in with a brush to fill in the details. Something that most people do with these models and a great way to go for the most part. Personally, while I think this is probably the best approach, I've always felt that the cloth, which has become way more of a staple on these models, gets left out and doesn't look as awesome as it could in terms of speed to quality. My solution to that is to mainly focus on the cloth with the airbrush and hand paint the armor, but use simple techniques to elevate that armor and make it look much nicer. So let's start with an airbrush of dark blue over all of the cloth, making sure to get an even coat and letting the shadow stay a little darker than the raised folds. I'll push that highlight a little more with a mid-tone blue, only focusing on the raised areas, and finally some light blue on the ends of the cloth, up near the face and shoulders. Here are the specific paints that I used if you want to recreate this look. This gives us a quick dynamic look for the cloth, and on the Praetors in particular, this color is the main focus. On the Annihilators, they don't really have any cloth, so coming in with an airbrush to take care of the gold is the best way to go. There are small patches of blue that also get airbrushed, the shoulders and shield, and that way we have the same kind of color and gradients on those areas. Any overspray can be cleaned up with a little bit of gold over the top and you pretty much never know. Before getting to the armor, I used some white to do the undersides of each cloak. In a couple of areas where the cloak is folded over, I just used a business card to block that paint and just get that little bit that was hanging over the edge. But the rest of it, as long as you're spraying in a single direction, you can take care of it pretty quick. It's also something you can do with a neutral gray from Pro Acryl that goes on really nicely with a brush, and you can be a little bit messy with it and not really have to worry about it and just paint over it if you get any of it on the armor. The point of picking one over the other is purely to make the standard pieces on the model look as good as we can as quickly as we can. In army painting, there are a lot of things you can do to make a quick job look good, and this is a great way of doing that. Find the focus of the army and do some extra work on those pieces, and you won't have to spend too much time getting them to look that way. Any time saved by using the airbrush or dry brushing those cloth bits can be put into making that armor look a little nicer later on, and even then, we do have some things to help. Moving on to Yndrastra, I don't know. I had this idea to do a muted kind of burning wing look, and I thought that with the blue cloth, the red, orange, and yellow would be an awesome standout look for an army. I actually spent quite a bit of time going back and forth with these colors, and the model looks kind of cool. But at the end of the day, it felt like it was a little bit too much for a single model to be painted so differently, especially if I'm trying to sell them as a group. So I cleaned it off and went with a much more straightforward white and blue look to match the other models, which still looks pretty good. I will probably pursue this look at some point though. I think it could be really cool, and since I know there will be a ton of older Stormcast models on eBay, I might end up with a whole used army sooner than later and try it on that, but not today. The large centerpiece model isn't too different than the other ones, they're still a focal point. In this case, it's obviously the wings, but realistically they are separated from the body enough that they can be painted separately. And if you have a new one that's on sprue, then you can just wait to glue the wings on until after you've painted the rest of the model, which I would recommend. After the cloth is done, you can see that the models still need quite a bit of work, but with the proper kind of paint, we can make short work of it. Vallejo model color gold covers insanely well over everything in just about one coat, so going over the armor doesn't take too much time at all, and it looks pretty good, and it's a nice looking gold. Once the armor is taken care of, I can tackle these smaller details like belts and ropes. I'm going with a purple brown color called Arbuckle's Brown from Scale 75, a great color that has a ton of versatility depending on how much you thin it down. When it's really thin, it's very purple, and when it gets a couple of layers, it can be a really nice dark brown. Perfect for just about all the details on these models. So you got belts and gloves and ropes and hairs, lots of things. To break up the gold, I'll come in with some steel, also from Vallejo metal color. It has the same kind of coverage as the gold and does a great job at breaking up the single color. So one coat of this on a few parts and pieces and we're looking pretty great. The only other color I'll be using will be that neutral gray from Pro Acryl. This will take care of any of the banners on the models. Once the base coats have been taken care of, we can start to get this armor to a better place. The first step will be to use Tamiya Panel Liner Black over everything. This will get into the recesses and separate each piece on the model, and we can use a makeup sponge to just wipe away any excess on the surfaces. Some of this will still be left and it will darken that gold down a little bit, which is perfect because that gives us an opportunity to brighten the armor back up with that original gold, and we can create more separation and contrast as soon as the oil dries. The next step is to add a bit more color to the armor, so I'll mix up a bright green and blue oil paint with some mineral spirits to make a teal verdigris. Adding this bright color to the armor will continue to break up the panels and give the model a ton more interest. And sure, gold might not degrade, definitely doesn't, or create a patina, but we don't really know what this material is made of. It's sigmarite or something. Not necessarily pure gold, because let's be honest, that would be a weird material for armor to actually be made of. I don't think it would really protect you. It might be expensive. So patina away. I like to keep this on the gold for the most part, but if the colors are right next to each other, then it makes sense for some of it to drip down and mix in a little bit. Overall, this really does a lot for the armor color-wise, and both washes do matte down the metallics quite a bit and darken them down. Now, like I said, we can come back in with those colors and start to brighten up the armor and really make each piece stand out even more. So let's go ahead and take care of that. The flat panels get a layer of gold to clean up any wash that doesn't really look good, and everything gets an edge highlight to really frame those panels. I'll follow that up with a mix of bright silver in with that gold, and start to add that to the armor where the reflections are strongest. This pushes the highlights and makes that armor look pretty fancy. The other thing that needs to happen to push the armor is to add a little bit of warmth and darkness. Using Seraphim Sepia, which is not as warm and dark as something like a Reikland Flesh Shade, can be used to tint the shadows towards reddish brown and not overdo it right out of the bottle. On Yndrastra, there you go. You can see this a little better because of those squiggly pointy things on her armor. With a little bit of shade on the parts that don't get hit directly from the light above and some silvery gold on the upper curves, you get a little more contrast on the metal and it creates a much more dynamic look for those pieces. These models didn't take too long to paint, and again I am shooting for a slightly better than tabletop level. Nothing over the top and nothing that takes too long. It's about army painting, but still looks really nice on the table. What I really like is how quickly you can get the models on the table with just a few base coats, even if you didn't want to put in the extra work with the armor and just leave it base coated. The cloth on the model makes them look nice already. It's probably the first thing that anybody's actually going to notice. So you can paint a good amount of the models that still need work but also look good enough to play with on the table at a club. The oil washes are the real magic here. Adding the black lining and extra color do so much work. Hopefully this will give you some ideas on how to build and paint a new army for that new edition. You definitely don't need to go out and just buy a full box to get started, and even the new books are available separately on the used market. Using older models to help get your army going is also a great way to get to bigger games. So don't forget those things are still out there and at a much more discounted price, even still. The new Stormcast models since Dominion have been some of my favorite models to paint. Out of just about any of the models that I own. There's just something about them that feels good to put paint on, and there are so many different ways that you can paint them. They're just pretty fun. I am looking forward to picking up more of the new ones and getting them onto the channel. If you are interested in supporting this channel and growing your army for those games of Fourth coming up, then please check out the links in the description and pinned comment for that eBay auction. The proceeds go directly to rescuing more minis and keeping things going for the channel. And as always, the auction will start at the same price that I paid for the minis, which I think in this case was something like $35 for all of them. So that's where we're going to start. I appreciate everyone for checking it out and helping keep the lights on. Thank you. And thank you again for joining me on another miniature rescue. If you like something about this video, please consider hitting that like button, sharing this video with your hobby friends, and subscribing for more miniature rescues. Once again, I'm Casey, and I will see you in the next video. And of course, here are the completed Stormcast Eternals. Thanks again.